Hey everybody, I got a video here for you today. This is one is by request. I've had questions on my Great Pyramid video, and this is something I did not cover in my Great Pyramid video, was the shafts, the four shafts in that, and they said they are aligned to stars, or they are air shafts, and there are many different theories, but I'm going to tell you my theory on it, and it's just based on what the ancient Egyptians tell us, and it's symbolic, and everything has a meaning. And sometimes we think of it with our modern views and just don't think like these early people, whoever they were, who built the Great Pyramid. Now I'm going to read from E.A. Wallace's book here about the Egyptian text that was written in 1904, I believe. And I'm just going to read a couple chapters and then just make a conclusion here. It says, in the preceding chapters we are devoted to the consideration of general questions concerning God and the gods. No mention is made of the habitation of these divine beings or of their companions. The texts of all periods are silent as to the exact position of heaven, but it is certain that the Egyptians assigned it to a place above the sky, and they called it, and then they have a word here, pet. We must distinguish between the meanings of this and nut, for the former means heaven, and the latter sky. And I'm going to probably do a video on hieroglyphics, but this slab with these little things at the end pointing down and up are meanings for different meanings for the sky. And some of these hieroglyphs here are like single letters. Some of them are double letters, some of them are determinatives, which really let you know what the previous text means. And the hieroglyphs are it's too detailed to go into, but I will probably do a video on that. We have symbols for water, heaven, sky, but he says the Egyptians really don't have a position for heaven, but the word Sahu, which is peppered through the earliest text, has a few different meanings, and one of them clearly is a spirit in the afterlife in Orion. That's what the whole context of Sahu means, and that is peppered throughout the earliest text. So I think there is a clear position of heaven, and the text says a king, or the embodiment of a king in the soul of everyday man, lives on as a star in the constellation of Orion, and you take a boat there in the afterlife. Now it says, we may also note that two skies are mentioned in the text, the day sky and the night sky. The hieroglyphic for heaven and sky represents a slab, each end of which rests on a support, and we may assume that the primitive Egyptians believed that each end of heaven rested upon a support, i.e. two mountains. Out of one mountain came the sun every morning, and into the other he entered every night. And the two mountains, I think, are represented by the two big original pyramids at Giza. That just seems clear, because at certain positions the sun rises and sets between those two pyramids. When you're sitting at right places on Giza, where you are supposed to observe the sun, like the monument we call the Sphinx. And the hieroglyph for the circular hieroglyph, if I can find one here, I don't see one, but the hieroglyph for Ra also can be meant to mean time, light. So I just wanted to mention that. Now it says, the latter division, and they're talking about the heavens here, and the hieroglyph for the heavens, and sky and night. It says the latter division was made long before the pyramid texts were written, for in them it is always assumed that the flat slab of iron which formed the sky, and therefore the floor of the abode of the gods, was rectangular, and each corner of it rested upon a pillar. That is a very ancient view concerning the sky, and is proved by the hieroglyphic, and then it gives a little hieroglyph with the sky, the ends of it pointing down to determine the sky, and the four pillars, which is used in the text to determine words for rain, storm, and the like. Here we have a picture of the sky falling and being pierced by the four pillars of heaven. It says, at a later period, the four quarters of heaven were believed to be under the direction of four gods, and the four pillars of the sky were poetically described as the four scepters which they held in their hands. Thus in the text of Teta, it is said, as Teta goes towards them, they bring unto him the four gods who stand with the scepters of heaven, and they repeat the name of Teta to Ra, and they take his name to Horus of the two horizons. Now, pharaohs had their names interjected into these earliest texts in their temples. It says, in several texts, allusion is made to the lifting up of heaven upon its four pillars. Now here is ancient origins, and I'll leave the link below, but they say the star shaft theory of the Great Pyramid busted, and you can just read this for yourself. But here are those shafts, as we call them, but symbolically, these early pre-Egyptians, the ones who the dynastic Egyptian civilization spun out of, who built the Great Pyramid. These are symbolic pillars, I believe. That is just what this says to me. And here in this video, the Jed, Orion, and the Great Pyramid Secret, I went over how the earliest text seems to determine that the Great Pyramid is the place of four columns, and it all has to do with the movement of the stars across the sky, and the angle here, and then the straight up angle representing Orion. And how do we know this? Because it says so. And the left foot is striding on the bottom of this column. That is Orion. And it says here in the pyramid text, this early text of Egypt, it says in Utterance 2:17, it says, Lord of dispensation in the sight of the four papyrus columns. Your son comes to you, this Unas comes to you, that you may stride over the sky. And that's really, I think those columns indicate the striding over the sky. That just makes sense to me. That you may use, or that you may rise on the horizon in the place where you like to become a podium or a pyramid. And it says, he comes indeed, this Unas, an imperishable spirit. And that is the same as Sahu, and that is connected with Orion. It says, Unas comes to thee, an imperishable spirit, Lord of dispensation, in the sight of the four papyrus columns. And that is all about the four columns, and it is all about the Great Pyramid. There seems to be text relating the king's chamber to the duat. And what it says to me, these four columns are the four columns of heaven, related in the earliest text that the dynastic Egyptians copied off a much earlier text that was falling apart, or they feared that they were going to lose. And does this have any connection with the builder gods? Well, let's go on here. Chief among the dwellers in heaven was the god Ra, who is said to sit upon an iron throne, the sides of which are ornamented with the faces of lions, and feet resembled the hoofs of bulls. And that is common point with thrones. The arms came out to the head of lions on each side. The dual lion was a common theme. Lions represented power, and they were really represented in the chairs or the thrones of the pharaohs. So I'm not totally anti-lion. They were represented in a few different things, and sometimes on the ends of the slabs that the dead pharaohs were mummified on. It says, round about Ra, whether walking or sitting, were the gods who were in his train, and these formed the nucleus of the inhabitants of heaven. Next to these, certain companies of the gods, and as a whole universe was divided into three portions, namely heaven, earth, and the Tuat or underworld, and each portion had its own god. We may assume that a place was reserved for them in the heaven of the Egyptians. But this heaven also contains several classes of beings, first and foremost, among whom may be mentioned in the Shesu Heru, or the Shemsu Heru, a name which appears in the pyramid text, or the Shemsu Hor, the builder gods, the ones that really are prehistory people who existed in Egypt, that were enlightened beings. They call them gods just because they were very enlightened. These are the ones that supposedly built these original structures and brought civilization to Egypt and carried it on after it was originally brought here after a great destruction on an island. It says, they are, in fact, beings who followed Horus, the son of Isis, in heaven, where they waited upon him and performed his behests, and when necessary defended and protected him. They occupied a position of great importance among the celestial hosts, and are mentioned in such a way as to suggest they were almost equal to the gods. So, in review, I believe these 4 shafts are referred to as the 4 columns in the earliest text. They are related to the king's chamber and the queen's chamber, and remember, those are just names that current historians have given these places. 2 columns coming out of the queen's chamber, 2 columns coming out of the king's chamber. They are representative of the pillars of heaven, according to the earliest text. That is just my view. Hope you followed along. Sometimes I have difficulty putting concepts into words. Hope you followed along. But that's my theory of the 4 shafts. They are not air shafts. They are not star shafts. They are symbolic of a striding over the sky. And the pyramid points straight up, the place where Orion is venerated when he's straight up in the night sky. Hope you thought that was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.